Hello, hello. You are listening to the Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Lera Kooper. The pun is intended, but it's not that creative. My name is just in the middle of the title. But true to the definition, we're here to help you view your business like an investor would, to maximize your value in one of your life's biggest investments. And today we have a very special guest, someone I've known for a few years and have had the pleasure of working with side by side through several projects. He is the owner of CS Business Consulting, president of Shelton Associates, and if that wasn't enough, he's also your new TV host of Pivotal Change. And so your guest today is Ryan Conn. Thank you for joining.
Well, it is absolutely my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And that is a mouthful. So I'm going to let you take the mic for a little bit and give me an answer to one of our icebreaker questions, which is what's your go-to karaoke song?
My go-to karaoke song is a pretty interesting one. I became obsessed with Billy Joel back when I was younger, and most specifically, I like the song "We Didn't Start the Fire." And most people don't realize this, but that's like a chronological of events, all the significant world events from like 1951 through 1983. He puts them in order and he makes them all rhyme with a pretty cool song. So that is the one that most people don't expect you to sing. And I get up there and I rock it. I memorized it at an early age, which actually earned me an A plus in a speech class spontaneously. First day of class, teacher's going over the syllabus in high school and says one of the things you have to do is you're going to have to memorize a 2-minute speech, and it has to be a literary work. And I said, well, hey, can that literary work be a poem, like a song? And they said, absolutely, that would be considered a literary work. And I said, that's great. In just 2 minutes? Yes. Can I go now? First day of class. And she's like, this is a midterm assignment worth 25% of your grade. And I was like, cool, I'll go now. Right. So we went over to the computer. We printed off the lyrics so she could read them. And I just sat on a stool on the first day of class and just recited, "We didn't start the fire, start to finish, no ums, uhs, no breaks or anything like that." And we had a really good time. She just floored herself and gave me the A plus for the assignment and A plus in the class overall eventually. So definitely going with Billy Joel on that one.
Man, that sums up your work ethic pretty well, I think. That is incredible. I'm a little bit afraid of karaoke myself because I can't carry a tune for the life of me. But I'm gonna remember that. Just memorize the song. Memorize the song. You can always deliver in spoken word.
Yeah, well, I'm not a good singer, but I ask my kids, I've never let that stop me. So
That is funny. Good story. Well, I think something that's special about the two of us is we're both in tax and accounting, in the advisory space, very similar, opposite sides of the country, but we both have unique backgrounds. We didn't come into tax and accounting in the traditional manner. Neither of us are, went in as CPAs or even enrolled agents. And so, can you give us a little bit of backstory and how that actually benefited how you run your tax and accounting and other businesses?
absolutely, I love the question, and I'm really proud of my story. Wayne Shelton Associate CPA. He is the founder of that company. It's been around for 26, 28 years now, I think. It's in its 28th year. And he's been running it effectively for a long time. And eventually he grew to a point where he was realizing that he was starting to have growing pains. And that goes back to my background. I actually did 12 years in law enforcement at our local police department. And I was very fortunate that our agency was huge into training. They thought training and giving the right resources was paramount to success. And that paid dividends. So I got to go to lots of trainings. I was on the SWAT team for over a decade. I was a SWAT team leader, the firearms instructor. I was a active shooter instructor. In fact, I created the program that then caught on for the rest of the state. I did a lot in there. I went and did everything but canine, basically. I was a sergeant, did detectives, undercover drug and vice unit. So I had a beard back when I was a cop, big burly beard, looked like a ruffian walking around town, and I was one of those guys. Got to do it. Police training officer, just all kinds of different things in there. And I got sent to a lot of good leadership trainings. International schools based out of Florida, FBI. They have these little broken up academies, FBI little trainings and academies, and just various good things that I really paid attention. I learned how to learn and documented all these things. And I tried to use as much wisdom as I could to take something in law enforcement or in one category and then apply it to a broader category. Wayne was an observer to all of this. And Wayne was also the official police department bad guy for about 8 years. He would show up to our trainings and basically get beat on and shot with plastic bullets. And he'd been pepper sprayed and dog bitten, gone to SWAT, and he'd been on bases with us to do missions. And he was actually in the police department promo video as the person we were rescuing. In
He's
one of
a
our
glutton
missions.
for punishment, isn't he?
He is, and he has a big jiu-jitsu background and stuff like that. So he's never been too afraid of getting in there. And as we had conversations over Thanksgiving and the dinner table and Sundays after church and stuff, he would express some of his frustrations and realize that a lot of the trainings I was getting was leadership and just generational gaps, leadership and situational leadership, and how to have various command presence and adapt to change and all of these things. So I would do what you're very familiar with a lot of accountants in the what I call the tax factory model is somebody needs your help. They ask you a question, you're reactive, you sprinkle some advice into their situation, and you say, oh yeah, if you're giving me a problem, well, if you go do A, B, and C, it'll fix all your problems and you'll save money on taxes. Well, I was doing the same thing for Wayne, saying, oh, Wayne, well, this person's motivated this way, and this person's having that problem because of this, so just implement that and go do C, and that'll fix all your problems. I just sprinkled the advice. Well, in the tax world, what happens is the client immediately leaves and they forget what A was. They do B halfway and they get C done, but it's screwed up, right? And so now they're frustrated with you, you're frustrated with them, and there's this friction. And Wayne, not having been formally trained as a leader, would go back and he would forget what A was, do B halfway, and C would get screwed up. And so I finally got to the point where he just said, hey, I need you. I need you to partner up with me and come do all of the things we've been talking about. And he made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I immediately partnered up with the firm. And over time, I became the president and leading the operations. I implemented the team model, which has absolutely exploded us to success. We became an advisory firm and got out of the tax factory model of just doing as many tax return widgets as possible to be profitable. And we've really grasped that value-based mindset and the ability to grow people, be leaders of not only ourselves, but of our clients and our third parties and in the community, and really try to change those things. So Wayne had the epiphany, and respect and kudos to him to identify a knucklehead like me to come in here and try to make change in the private sector.
That is an incredible story. And I mean, I know you make it sound easy, but it still sounds hard. And so, what does one do when they don't have the decade of training in leadership for one, and in such a high stress environment? I'm sure that was a huge refining factor in even how you went in and brought it into another industry, right? Because when you're in tax and accounting, you realize what life and death really is. So how do you take that training and really just not dilute, what's the word I'm looking for, but really just bring it down and apply the theory to another industry?
So that was where I was really caught off guard. In fact, it kind of goes to the final statement Wayne got to actually bring me out, because I had no intentions of leaving law enforcement. I was about to be promoted to captain, right? I had to turn down a captain promotion to go to the private sector. It really sent ripples through the police department.
That's a big risk.
They were scratching their heads like, what made this guy leave? And it was just simply this picture of a different life and having a better version of influence and impact on people.
Talk about pivoting.
Yeah, the big pivot. Yeah. And I was nervous. I was scared. I was like, Wayne, I don't know how to do tax returns. I'm very, very fluent in constitutional law, and I could quote KRS statutes all day long, but tax is code. I'm not afraid of numbers. I've always been a physics and mathematician, big nerd. And I just Wayne's like, don't worry, I can teach a monkey to do a tax return. I need you for leadership, right? And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Well, he hired me by basically convincing me I was as dumb as a monkey, and I'll just leave that one right there. But
walked right into it.
I walked right into it. It took me years to realize it too. So point in case for him, right? But to break it down, I was shocked at how much that leadership is just universal. And one of the statements that I hold dear to myself, it's one of the quotes that you'll see in a lot of my trainings, a lot of my materials, like, leaders are not born, they are made. And what you do is you do the crawl, walk, run model. And I tell people you have to first dedicate yourself to being a very good follower before you can ever truly begin to be a good leader at all. And in law enforcement, and in a lot of things, people always want to do the really extreme fun stuff right off the bat, right? So some rookie cop comes in there and says, yeah, I want to do the active shooter training, right? Because, man, that's intense, and I'll grow my skills. Like, hey, buddy, that is the sprint. not only crawl, walk, run, that's a sprint, right? We need to crawl first. We need to teach you how to put your uniform on the right way. We need to teach you how to drive safely in the different conditions and how you work your software and your radio and this kind of stuff. We'll get to that down the road. Same thing with leadership. Everybody says, hey, I want to run a multi-million-dollar industry and navigate all these teams and have people underneath. That's cool. But you need to take one project, one example of something that you're struggling with or a single pain point and attack it. And then you need to start reading books and finding people and resources and mentors that can start coaching you through these changes, can identify and literally lay your finger on the problem and then create the solution and say, go forth and execute on that plan. And if you don't take a breath and slow down, you're never going to learn to crawl, let alone walk, run, and hopefully one day sprint. And that's the big thing I tell people is to take a breath, slow down, and let's find one area we can work on first.
It's probably a reality check most don't want to hear. Everyone wants to be in that position where they're successfully running a multi-million-dollar company. They've replaced themselves. Their team is operating. But how do you get there? That's the hard part, and that's obviously why not everyone is doing it. So, do you have any suggestions on books or resources, or just where do I get started today if I want to develop myself as a leader and ultimately build a team of leaders that can then lead others?
That is a beautiful question. I like it. So one of the things that I have developed is something called business foundations. And then there's a separate but very similar thing called a leadership lab. And the business foundations goes through and it tells people how to literally lay the foundation of their business. And without laying that cornerstone, you can never build up or out. It will eventually get wobbly. It'll get off kiltered. You won't have, and it will crash, right? And so to set your business foundations, you have to have a mission statement, a real one that was put great thought and effort into, and it means something, and it's a workable tool. And then everybody has to know what the mission is. If you have not established a mission, and everybody on the team or everybody in the department or, of course, company-wide is not showing up to accomplish that mission on a daily basis, well, then the mission will fail. The second thing you need is a vision statement. So it's really just, what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want as a company to be when you grow up? And you need to very clearly and simply articulate that vision and rally everybody around that vision. And that's very important, is you have to have the right vision and the passion and the right people supporting that vision. And what happens is once you firmly establish your vision, you will find out from there if people are on the bus or off the bus. That's the point where you kind of call the herd. And for us, we had two people that really didn't want to be here in that style, which that's what we were working for the whole time. But we weren't working for it with clarity and purpose and diligence. Once we began those things, they said, hey, I want off this bus, and they sought employment elsewhere. And that was toxic to us, and so we got rid of toxicity. So it was actually a blessing, even though the staffing measures, they seemed to hurt at the time, but it ultimately turns out to be okay. After you get your vision established, you need to understand truly down to the core who you are. So I help people establish their core values. Excuse me. And the core values, you have a whole set of values. Most people have about 10 values. They could think a little bit critically about and write their 10 values down on paper, or maybe select them from a list. Well, I run people through a test that draws out your core values. And the core are the final three that you will live, fight, love, and die for. Okay. And that's the big part. Those are the ones that are the very basis of what you make all of your most critical decisions on. And here's the funny part. Those same core values, if you and I, Lera, did not have similar core values, after just a little while being exposed to each other, we would start having friction. We would realize that our core values don't line up. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have people with lined up core values, every relationship will destine to break. And that includes marriages, friendships, community obligations, business partners, whatever it is. The disalignment of core values fractures those things. That's why it's so important to know what they are, identify them, and connect with them in other people. So when you find your core values, you can now put these things on paper, define them, let everybody know what they are, and then again establish the company core values. So everybody shows up every single day and they understand completely, not just some pretty wall hanger, but we have a mission and this is what we're accomplishing. And we have a vision and this is where we're going together. Okay. Mm-hmm. These are the core values that we're going to stand on that are going to get us there. And then the final piece to that is the leadership philosophy. That person at the very top develops an entire philosophy, which is your leadership brain put on paper. Okay. And I deliver this within the first 4 hours of every new hire because I am establishing my leadership philosophy and my culture literally from the kickoff. They walk in the door, they get a tour, they get some donuts, they get to say hi to people, they find their office, they get logged in, get some passwords, and here comes the boss delivering leadership philosophy within 4 hours. Okay, before we take you to lunch on your first day. Okay. And when we do that, you get to have this power. So you have this document, right? This leadership philosophy. And let's say I'm gone. Let's say I'm on a podcast and nobody can get a hold of me and they have to make a decision right now in crisis. They can hold it up and compare it to that leadership philosophy and say, yes, Ryan would do this, or no, Ryan wouldn't. And how many times do you think they would be correct if they compared it to that piece of paper?
Right. Knowing you, it'd be very clearly defined.
100% of the time, they will be correct. And I will always return happy with their decision because they leaned on my leadership brain, which I gave to them.
Yeah.
How much power would it also be? Have you ever had a boss where you just couldn't figure out why you keep ticking them off and why you keep ruffling their feathers?
Right. Yeah.
Part of the leadership philosophy, you put your pet peeves, your personal idiosyncrasies down on the paper. And so I have 4 or 5 of them where I tell people, hey, if you just don't do this, you won't ruffle my feathers. You will never upset me if you avoid this list of things.
Are you going to let us see behind the curtain and tell us what those 4 or 5 things are?
I could. So a couple of them. So one of them is timeliness. Don't be late, right? Now, I'm very much reality-based and human, right? You get a train, drives across the train tracks, you're late that day. I'm not going to hammer you, right? Your kid is sick and had an accident at the house and you're running late. I get it. There is life. But you come in with any consistency late at all, well, that's just disrespect. There's no better way to prove to somebody you don't respect them by dishonoring their time. Yeah. That's the one resource we don't get back. So that's one of my pet peeves, right? And it takes 0 skill, 0 talent to show up someplace on time. Another one that is mine, now I won't go through them all, but another big one, and it comes with a little bit of a story here, is a refusal to share expertise, right? So if you refuse to share expertise, and we had one girl that left right as I came on board, and she thought she was the most valuable by holding this. So she was the only person that knew how to access this software and run this program, which we've since got rid of. And she thought she was so valuable, and they can't get rid of me because I own this thing, and I'm not giving it to anybody. No, you can't have the login. No, I won't show you how to do it. No, I'm on vacation. Well, you're just going to have to wait till I get back till I can do it. That made you less valuable. If you can teach 5 other people how to be just like you, you're infinitely more valuable to me now.
Yeah.
Because when you leave, guess what? I'm just going to call the admin at the company and they're going to reset it and open it, and I'll pay $200 for a training to get the next person going.
Yeah. Getting egos out of the equation, I think, is fundamental to running a successful business, because how else are you going to rally together and accomplish something if you constantly have this drag that's being created?
Yep. Oh, that's a hard thing to do with people. And that goes kind of, I have the 7 principles of leadership, which is one of the speeches I go around the company and give. And the first one is be humble, right? So the first one is be humble. And honestly, it's the first one because I have struggled with that a lot in my lifetime. And so I need to slap myself first before I try to get anybody else on board. But that's important. That is a characteristic that is echoed throughout time in leaders, right? Now, there's a time to be bold and courageous, but that's not being humble. Those are 2 different things. And so that's pretty fun, is that leadership philosophy then gets you. So if I were going to tell somebody back to the original question you asked was, find a way to get your mission firmly established, your vision perfectly clear, your people relying on the values that they're going to show up and make decisions on every day, and have a clear, perfect view of what their leader is and how they operate with their decisions. If you can do those things, which is not that hard, believe it or not, there's a course out there that you can take and do it online and come out the backside of this course with it done. And then all you have to do, take this ribbon that you just built and deliver. You just have to have the courage to deliver it and then hold people to it. And I think that's a fantastic way to get started.
Yeah. No, I think that's a fantastic investment, because if you have other people or documents that are able to speak on your behalf, your voice was just amplified, and your pet peeves were just amplified, and all those things that are just in your mind, now other people can abide by and do on your behalf. But it does sound, it does sound like a lot of self-reflection is required. So is that challenging for a lot of business owners as you go through this process with them, to really get them to dig deep and find out, why am I motivated to be in this business, or what motivates me about XYZ? How deep of a process is it?
So it is a good deep process, but I try to make it more fun than I do anything else. And most people could probably, we'll play a little memory game like, hey, remember a time when you laughed so uncontrollably, you couldn't hold it, you didn't even recognize yourself, maybe you were tearing or spitting milk out your nose or whatever it was, you were laughing so uncontrolled. What was going on? What was going on? Who were the people were you with? Why? Why was the joke or the scenario so funny? We'll play a game and we'll start driving down to the very positive side of your core values, right? And they're like, oh my gosh, because this was going on here and we all this. I mean, I know you had to be there, but they start chuckling just listening to the memory and come out of their mind and their mouth. And then you can also do the other side too is like, hey, when was the time you were most hurt? The saddest, darkest moment of your life, right? And so what I do is I actually enter them into a test. And I say, let's pull these out. And there's a test that you walk through. It's like a 4 or 5 part test. And what I tell them is, guys, I really want you to take this seriously, and I'm going to put you on the clock. So you can't think about it forever, but you also can't do it in 30 seconds. Okay. So it gives you that time to think about it. And at the very end of the test, guess what, Lera? There's a screen. It's designed to determine if you were lying to yourself, right? So I'll give you another example. I'm down here in Kentucky. We're basically in the Bible Belt. So one of the things is some type of spirituality or faithfulness is a core value that a lot of people in the Bible Belt really want to champion. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I'm not saying that's not important. You don't make your daily decisions on that, but that may not be a core value that you're operating on every single day at your core, right? So again, it's important, and it doesn't mean you're not going to your place of salvation, but we're taking a test here to determine your decision-making abilities. So there's ways to screen that out, and the test at the end will be like, no, you lied to yourself. Try again. Yeah. And then you're like, ooh, and then you got to go out and you got to restart, not the whole test, but at least swapping out one value for another to determine which one is at your core. Yeah. So that's really fun, and we play with it. And when you read through the questions and you go into these memories, that's pretty fun. At the end of it, most people, I've had some pretty bold statements come out of it. Most people are like, I've never done anything like that before in my life, and I learned more about myself in the 15 or 20 minutes it took to this than I have in the last 10 years. That was one of my favorite statements. And that woman, she's up in Minnesota doing an excellent job starting her new CPA firm, and she is killing it. And she took all of those principles and just jump straight in, put them in place. But yeah, it does go deep. You're going to have to remind yourself of the good times and the bad times, but that's because we need to discover what was carrying you through those periods.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, just hearing you talk about those exercises, my mind went to my own answers to those questions because I started the leadership lab that you offer myself a while back, and I got sidetracked, and I'm now motivated to finish it. It's really cool that you're able to connect those dots for people, because it's challenging to be objective for yourself sometimes. And as a business owner, you're often alone. And so you don't have someone else to call you out on that or to hold you accountable.
Well, I'm going to put a little cherry on top here. So one of the fun parts about being accountable to yourself is when you take this test, the final check, and here comes the train, but the final check is that you get 3 people that are important to you. So like a business partner, a spouse, a child, a best friend, and you have them read your core values and your definitions. You have to define your core value, and you have them read that, and they give you the feedback and say, does this sound like me? Do I live by these values? And they answer the question.
Oof, okay. So and I can hear you over the train, so you're good, but that's a vulnerable place to be. And I don't think people realize that going into a leadership position, that you are becoming more vulnerable. And again, it depends on your leadership style. The higher role you get into, the more you realize that you have a lot to work on.
And to bring a good comment to you is that there are all kinds of leaders, okay? And one of the most prominent, influential, and most effective leaders of all time was Adolf Hitler, right? He convinced more people with more conviction to do atrocity things. But as far as just the pure definition of getting influence over people, one of the most highly effective leaders of all time. Terrible, terrible evil, but leadership potential, right? And then there's been some other incredible leaders as well. You could go back to the founding of America, look at our forefathers who said, we need to shirk this burden of oppression and free all these people, and we're willing to fight and die for it, right? And it produced the freest country in the history of the world. So there's incredible things you can do with your leadership. one of the key components of a leader. There's 11 characteristics of a leader, not principles, but characteristics that you can define. And one of them is they are aware of their influence. So a lot of us, whether we're bottom rung or we're leading the whole place, we really don't have a full realization of the impact of our leadership and our actions. And again, those behind the scenes actions. We think, oh, I'm standing up leading a meeting, and that's everybody sees me as a leader. But no, where you conduct, how you slam your car door in the morning when you're angry coming into work, those are some of the leadership things that get you as well. You need to be aware of your influence at all times.
Excellent point. Yeah, everything we do contributes to who we are as a leader. One other person that I can think of, fictional, that is often looked to as an admired leader, Ted Lasso. Have you seen the show?
I've not watched the show. I've seen hundreds of the clips. Absolutely love it, and I will watch it at some point. But yeah, that's a great
It's
clips. But yeah, tell me which one you're thinking of
Well,
particularly.
I'm just thinking of Ted Lasso in general because he comes in zero experience in the industry, is able to rally a team that starts with disrespecting him essentially because of his lack of experience. He's an American in another country. Um, but then he really figures out a way to rally and influence his team and the people around him and eventually to earn that respect. But again, not just in how he led the meeting, but in how he handled disappointments, challenges, successes. Are you gloating and taking all the credit, or are you really extending that to your team? How you slam your car door, same thing. It's a good lesson, I think, in leadership, not just on screen or during a meeting, but just how he lived as a leader.
I, I really want to springboard off this just for a second because I want to.
Please.
Can I? You're the host, but may I play question and answer with you for just a second?
Yeah, this is a
Okay.
conversation.
Okay. Good. So, Ted Lasso.
Yeah.
Would you claim for him to be humble?
Yes.
Would you claim him to be a passionate visionary?
Yes.
Okay. Does he set expectations and boundaries for people?
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay.
Kindly but clearly.
But he sets them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Does he? Hold on, I said, does he just give people the answers, or does he teach them how or where to find the answers?
Definitely teaches them with some roundabout ways. It doesn't really pull together until the end of the episode, but then it's a lifelong lesson.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah. So yeah, sometimes it takes a minute to get there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So does he create influence on his teams? Does he create influence among his followers, or does he hoard all the influence?
Creates influence amongst the team, big time.
Okay. Does he himself surround himself with other advisors and mentors?
Yes,
Yes, he does. Okay. And does he ever roll up his sleeves and get in the trenches with the troops?
for sure. There was an episode where they went down into the like plumbing of the city essentially just to learn a lesson. So I mean, if you're going to talk about getting down and dirty, that's it.
Getting down. So those are the 7 principles of leadership of which I go out and teach thousands of people every year across the country. And Ted Lasso demonstrates. He's a fictional character, so we can say whatever we want. But
Did you help with
everyone,
the script, or
no,
did they consult your expertise in developing this character?
it's not, and I don't have probably nearly as much expertise as the leader that they're relying on to embody Ted Lasso. But the point remains is that these principles effectively are universal, right? And so we can take Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, people in the modern era, and people that will come in the future, and we compare them to fictional characters, and they're going to have these 7 principles of leadership. And so, I give that speech. I've written that book. There's an ebook out there called The 7 Principles of Leadership. And so you look at what it is, and you continue to draw out, where's my first step? Where's my first step? Well, maybe your first step is taking that list of 7, finding the one that jumps out to you because, I'm not doing it. And you start there. And then you find a scenario or a person to where you can say, hey, flat out transparent, Lera, I've noticed that I have been hoarding all the influence and I have not been mentoring you and teaching you how and where to find the influence. I want to fix that. That's a weak spot for me. Can I use you as my guinea pig so that I can become a better leader? And I'd like to help teach you how to find answers and where to find answers. Instead of just giving you answers all the time and making it look like I know everything. Can I do that with you? And what would your response be if you'd been experiencing that for a
Oh,
while?
totally.
holy cow, right? And so that's where people can start today, and that doesn't take a whole lot of skill and effort, but it does take some courage, and it does take some diligence to actually put it on the calendar and follow up and make it happen.
And that awareness, like you said, the self-awareness of where those weak points are.
Yeah, I think a lot of people's self awareness comes from outside of self to start, right? Somebody has to give you a tool or a quote or a movie or a character to reference, and then you take that reference material and apply it inward, right? And I think that's where we find it a lot. And so find those materials, read books. There's incredible books out there, incredible people. Just yeah, I can only ever fantasize about being how intuitive they are with their leadership. But there's a lot to go and do out there, and that's what I really want to emphasize. People is there's no limit to the resources. There's no limit to the places you can go and the people you can talk to become a better person. You just have to want it.
Well, and it's very encouraging to hear that sentiment that great leaders are made, not born, because so many of us do not anticipate leading a team or leading a group, and it can be overwhelming. It's a daunting process to think, oh gosh, I'm responsible for the mentorship of these people, and so that's a nice sponsorship that they're made, not born.
And I believe that. And you've mentioned, we've talked about a couple of things, and I don't believe they come up on accident. But you've mentioned mentorship. We've talked about mindset and a couple of other things. But there's the 5Ms program as well. The 5Ms program does a good job of teaching people a path of how to examine and then execute. And what it does is the first M is mindset. You have to see yourself in a new light. You have to see yourself as the leader. You have to see yourself as valuable. And I really believe there's a plague in this country that we don't see the value that we have as humans and the values that we have of not being like that celebrity or not being like that, Fortune 500 list CEO or something like that. We don't see the value we have in ourselves or in the product or the service that we're providing. And so I think once we can capture that mindset of value and that mindset of leadership, the next 4Ms come a lot easier. And so the next one will just simply be the materials. And the materials are, what are you selling? Your material could technically be a service, a consultation. I'm selling a consultation. Your materials could be a bunch of t-shirts on the retail rack, right? It could be a construction site. It could be whatever. But your materials, you have to identify what exactly is the product you are selling, what it takes to sell the product, manufacture the product, deliver the product, all of the materials, the software to support the product, what credit card swipe system are you going to use, right? What's your point of sale? And all of those things are materials. Then you move from the materials, I'm going to sell this, I have the right mindset, I'm going to sell this product, this is what it takes to get it manufactured, delivered, marketed, sold, and hopefully recurring. And then you go to the methodology. In exact what system am I going to do that to not only be efficient but effective, and those are two different things, even though they correlate. And so we go in there and we find a method, and by the method is internal. How am I going to get my people rallied around? What's our workflow going to be? What's our method of communication going to be? What's our method of creation of the product? And you establish all of the methodology, and that's where a lot of people really like to focus on workflow. And I also find a lot of choke points, a lot of funnels in methodology. Now, there are some just for, security's sake, or there are some just for, maybe some type of credentialed or legal reason. You have to have certain choke points, but you want to reduce them as much as possible. And then after you get through your methodology and you get that established by blowing up the whole engine, looking at every component and part, reducing all of the redundancies and putting it back together, you move on to mentorship. In mentorship, we follow a principle that I've created called the fly on the wall methodology. Okay. And so mentorship, you take somebody and you just simply show them, and you're going to give them whole is what you're going to do. I'm going to show you the whole picture, right? And then I'm going to show you in great detail this part. Okay. And then after you fully understand the part, we're going to plug it back in. You're going to see how it connects to the whole and watch the light bulb go off. But the fly on the wall method is, let's just say an advisory meeting. Larry, would you ever like to have one of your newer staff members, they've only been in the game 1 or 2 years, to start turning over and actually delivering advisory meetings to clients?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the fastest way to get them to do that, you invite them into the meeting and you say, hey, client Johnny, Jimmy over here is going to be observing the meeting. We're teaching him how to do this process and deliver clients. Johnny says, oh, great. You guys are training people. Awesome. Zero issues with them being in the meeting. And you talk. Maybe you have 3 topics to cover that day. You go through A, B, and C, and your staff member just watches. They're literally a fly on the wall, just seeing how it works. Okay. Do that 2 or 3 times. On the third, fourth, fifth time, whatever they need, you come in there and say, hey, by the way, I'm going to do part 1 and part 2, and here's all the materials, here's all the product, or here's controls of the keyboard for you to do 3. What? Yeah, don't worry about it. I'm in the meeting with you. If you stumble over your words, you say something silly, I'll jump in there and fix it. I'm here to save you, right? But you're going from fly on the wall to fly on the table, right? You're now in the game. Okay. And so we go in there, and guess what? You do part 1, part 2, and part 3. They're prepped. You told them what to say. You gave them material. They deliver it, and they look and sound really smart. And they've seen it a few times before. Guess what? Next meeting, hey, you're going to do these 2, and I'm just going to do this last third part. I'm here to save you. Boom. Right? A couple of times after that, guess what? You're doing the whole meeting. I'm the fly on the wall. I'm just going to watch you do it, and I might take your notes for you so that you don't even have to do it. Concentrate on the client, right? And so we go in there and we do it, and before you know it, somebody else is trained to fly. Somebody else is trained to fly. The 2 flies are doing it together. And hey, guys, if there's a real emergency, I'm down the hallway. Just come get me, and I'll come save you.
Yeah.
And then you teach them how to hit the pause button. So now I'm the fly on the wall, and now I'm not even in the room, and everybody's eating their own picnic, right? And you could do that in a handful of sessions based on how much actual skill training you put into it. But it's not the skill training that's really needed.
Yeah.
It's the methodology.
Well, what a beautiful way too of building up their confidence in themselves, because that's part of building leaders, right? They're eventually going to be training someone else to be on the fly on the wall, like you said, and you're training them in the way that you want them to train others. And that all comes back to you knowing, you having definitions for vision, mission, process, materials, all those things from the very foundation.
It's worked out really well, and you have to be. I'll talk about a different content. Maybe we can say that for another show or something about failing forward and how important it is to allow people to fail. And I know that sounds crazy without probably diving into it more. But the other thing is too is after you get that mentorship going, you get that fly on the wall. That works in any category. It works literally in repairing an engine. Hey, buddy, come watch me take the gasket off and replace all the headers, right? Okay, cool. And then they put it back on there. And he watches you do it too. Then here's the wrench, buddy. You start the process. I'll do the details here. And same thing. And then they learn to teach somebody else that way, like you just said. I just really want to emphasize that point that you made, because I think obviously you're onto something. You're kind of smart, And so the last 5 M's is the measured growth, and the word measured is on purpose because Wayne and I, us, we can be eager beavers at sometimes. When we first started into advisory, we were selling. We
That's the entrepreneurial spirit. That's just how it goes.
It does, yeah. Sometimes it's a roller coaster ride too, right?
Big time.
But we I don't want to say bit off more than we can chew, because we got it done, but it became more chaotic and stressful than it needed to be, because we sold mentor as fast as we grew. So now we dialed down and said, hey, we are not going to allow ourselves to book more than 2 sales per week, because we sold 5 in 1 week and 3 in 1 day one time. And so that's a lot of advisory services then go deliver down the path, especially when you and I were effectively doing all the delivery at that point. Mm-hmm. So we were enjoying life, but we're also stressing on the other side of the coin as well, because we're doing a lot.
Yeah,
and so
it's not scalable.
It was not at that point, because I didn't have one of my M's in place properly. So that's the tough, those hard lessons, right? And that's part of failing forward. Is I failed, right? We actually lost our first ever client saying, "Hey, I just don't feel like I'm getting services I'm looking for." Right? We've only had one person say that, and it was not quite a year into the process. It was just because, we overbooked ourselves kind of a little bit. So we failed forward. We lost a client because of it, and now I learned never to make that mistake again. So I failed. Price of an education, right? And then I can correct that and measure it with other clients. And so the measured growth is also in your employees putting key performance indicators or growth measures, having evaluations to say, by this time next year, you have to have A, B, and C done. And there always needs to be at least 3 goals. At least 3 goals. One of them can be a pretty short-term win in the next 2 months, 3 months. One of them might be a little more skill-based, like you actually need to learn this performance thing. And then the third one can be a little softer. Hey, when you present from the clients, I want you to start incorporating language like this. I want you to respond to emails in this capacity. I want you to take on a training role with so-and-so and get them up to speed on this skill. So that's a little softer. That's not quite as check the box type of thing. And if you can get at least 3 goals, and you can do more, of course, then they have something to track. You've got them to come back to. Now you're measuring the growth of your employees. So I can, in my mind, predict that in 3 years, he's going to be leading a team.
Yeah.
In 3 years, she's going to be delivering every advisory client on her own and probably selling some packages for us too. And so you can predict that by measured growth. You don't get your arrow up and to the right so far that it crashes, and it's just very important to understand that is cross industries. But if you're an advisory firm as well, you can jump in here and literally just take the ball and run.
No, that's incredible. And for anyone that's looking to work on their business, that's the way to make it scalable, is through good leadership, good mentorship, and then having those clear objectives, like things that can be measured, that are well defined for your employees, because they're looking for that mentorship as well. They don't want to go into a new place of work and feel like it's a dead end job because they're doing the same thing every day, aren't learning anything, and aren't getting positive feedback. So that's very important just for retention, which can be a whole nother story, whole nother episode.
Oh, goodness, yeah. There's a lot of ways to retain people as well.
Yeah. So we'll have a part 2 eventually. But for today, do you have any final tips before we close out? Any final advice for business owners that are looking to work on their business?
Yep. Don't allow fear to be your enemy and control you. There's two forms of fear. There's the healthy fear, which is the respect. This person's dignified. I need to follow. There's the fear that says I'm not going to go play Frogger on the highway, right? Because there's unreasonable risk. That's good, healthy fear, and it keeps us alive. And then there's bad fear, which comes from self-doubt, negative thought. There's the I'll never make it, or it'll never be perfect, or whatever. You need to identify the type of fear you're experiencing and dismiss the other one. And then I need everyone, I don't care if you're listening to this podcast in your car or something, I don't want you to write it down and crash, but I need everybody at the conclusion of this podcast to write down that one thing they can take away from what you and I talked about today. They can write it down and say, on Monday, I don't know what day this is going to air, it doesn't matter, but on the next Monday from this podcast going live, write down what you will accomplish in related to leadership, in what capacity, in what way. Be specific. It should be 2 to 3 sentences at least, and then have it done by Wednesday. That's what I
like that. Very actionable, something to be held accountable to as well. Did I do this or not? Yes or no. So on that note, thank you so much for joining, Ryan. How can people find you, contact you, learn about your resources? What's a good place to go?
Of course, websites are always great. You can go to Shelton Associates CPA. You can Google us, and it goes to wmscpa.com, or you can go to csbizcon.com. So that's csbizcon.com. Those are the 2 websites. We actually have 1 phone number, and you pick who you talk to from the phone number, and that is 270-442-6688. You can get both companies at 1 phone number, and we'd be more than happy to have conversations. We do free consultations all the time. It never costs a dime to talk to me and introduce yourself, and we'll see what you got going on. And if you want our help, we're here to help. We try to make all people better. That's one of our goals.
Yeah, I think as entrepreneurs have that in common. We just want to help others. And one last thing that you mentioned that I want to make sure to link access to is this ebook with the 7 leadership principles. How can we find that?
So that is also on the website. And if you just go to free resources, there's a button that says free resources, drop down. There's your 7 principles of leadership. Download that ebook, have at it, enjoy it. And each one of those 7 principles of leadership comes with a fun story, some from law enforcement, some from current careers. And you hopefully be educated and be able to take something away from it. And I look forward to getting to help some people. I think that's probably one of our core values, is our type of service that we have for other people, and why we hit it off so well, and why we're able to drive our businesses the way we're able to drive our businesses.
Awesome. Tons of good stuff. Thank you for joining today, Ryan. And you're listening to The Accelerator. I'm your host, Lera Kooper. And until next time.